Our experience of life is based on what we think life is, what we believe life is to be. Our experience of infinity is limited. Our perception of infinite can never be infinite itself, so that the infinite is experiencing or perceiving the infinite, but that the infinite takes on whatever it is being contained in. And as long as infinity is contained, it is experienced as finite. As long as it is experienced through us as the perceiver, and therefore it is perceived, and therefore it is perceived as an experience, as that which becomes our manifest reality, our tangible reality, it is limited to that. And one prime example that most of us are existing within the lens of our perception is how much diversity there is in even just those of you on the path of spiritual awakening. Now, if we're going to take all of us together, look at the diversity of experience, look at the amount of diversity in what life means to you. Compare that to your neighbor, compare that to your own family members and friends. It is so diverse. And that diversity comes from the lens of perception. It comes from the perceiver. The perceiver is able to then modify infinity so that infinity no longer is experienced as infinity, but it's experienced as a finite, manifest reality. It is finite because it is limited to the perceiver's experience, which is born of the perceiver's memory bank, which is born of the perceiver's thought and feeling about any and every event that has impressed upon the perceiver. Whatever you carry as your beliefs, whatever you carry as what things should be, as long as your modus operandi is the mind, as long as your modus operandi through which you perceive life, through which you experience life, is the mind, then you're limited to what the mind can perceive. The mind cannot perceive infinity because the mind itself is limited. The mind is a container. Anything that is contained is not infinity. Anything that can be contained is not infinite. It becomes finite by the very fact that it is containable and contained. When you raise your consciousness, you're then able to expand your consciousness. You're then able to bypass the mind. And to be able to bypass the mind, it means that you will be operating from different brain waves. You're going to be entering into a state of meditation. You enter into a state where you're able to rise above the mind. So you move away from me, the body, me, the mind. You move away from all of the conceptualized way of living or experiencing life to living from that which is all. Now, when you start to live from consciousness, or you start to experience pure consciousness, you can then raise your existing experience depending on the level of consciousness at which you're operating from or that you are aware of. Once your consciousness is raised through your experiences of pure consciousness, then the perceiver begins to return to wholeness, begins to heal. The healing journey starts. And when that healing takes place, you can start to experience spurts of infinity. Now, for us to experience infinity, we will have to let go of our finite concepts. We're going to have to let go of wanting to contain everything, wanting to limit every experience, and wanting to mentalize everything. Flexibility is key and openness is key. Now, when we have so many concepts and our mind is overworked all of the time and we want our individuate sense of self to always be on top, so that you insist that no, this is just the way I want things to be, this is just the way that I want to experience something, then we are limited to that. But we can be limited to that if that's the experience we want, and we want to limit ourselves to this container. Then you can choose what kind of container do I, the perceiver, want to become. What kind of container do I want to me be? The container that is so flexible that I can contain even more and more of the experience of infinity through my finite self, which is the individuate sense of self. So you can experience it in any way and shape or form that you so will it to be, right? But when you keep a little door open, you can then increase this incrementally so that you can experience infinity in spurts. But in order for you to do that, we must go beyond the mind, because the mind cannot perceive the infinite. Hence, being in that state of meditation, hence adopting so many various spiritual practices, whatever it is that will take you to that state. When you go into that state, one thing that will come out of this is you will think less. There will be less planning. There will be less involvement or engagement of your mind, and you will live life through perception, through awareness, as opposed to through you experiencing an infinity that is contained and therefore finite. To be able to experience infinity, the first step is to realize I, the body, am finite. I, the mind, am finite. I, the individuate sense of self, am finite. I, the experience, am finite. My belief systems are finite. I, the container, am finite. But I, the consciousness, is infinite. So it's infinite. So how do I operate from pure consciousness so that I can experience infinity? To bring yourself into that state of absolute awareness, as opposed to an awareness that is tinged with the experience of the perceiver. It is not an awareness that comes from a false sense of self, but an awareness that is aware. Awareness, you see, folks, is not a character, it's not an attribute, it's not a facet, it's not an aspect. Awareness is very independent. Awareness is just awareness. Awareness can only ever be aware of itself. And therefore, for us to become aware, we've got to become awareness. To become awareness, we return to consciousness. To return to consciousness, we disallow the mind. And we know that it's not spiritual bypassing, it is not spiritual escapism. You've got to go through shedding and letting go of this. And the beauty of operating from pure consciousness is once you start to rise, conditioned existence literally melts away. So it isn't that you're going to work on yourself, but it literally starts to melt away. You shed it, burns to ashes. Karma is literally destroyed when you start to operate from a place of pure consciousness. So the key for you to experience infinity through a finite container is only one: pure consciousness. To become aware is to be awareness.